Morning, guys. This is Young Newer from Advanced Property Strategies, and welcome again to this week's episode and podcast. So I've got, Renovating Superstar, Bernadette Janson. How you going, Bernadette?
I'm going really well, thanks, Jan.
Excellent. And
did I pronounce that correctly? I always feel a bit confused about whether I'm doing it right.
No, you're fine. You're perfectly
Beautiful.
fine. Yeah, it's just like young with an N in front, and you've actually said it very, very well. So, and thank you for checking in with me. But no, it's all good. It's all good. Since I was a kid, people would pronounce it wrong, and you just got to give it up and get on with the show. And having said that, today's about you, not about me. And you run a podcast called She Renovates, as well as the School of Renovating. So
exactly, yeah. So
tell us more about that, and
Okay, so the School of Renovating was born out of a love of working with people. So I've been renovating on and off for 35 odd years. In fact, my husband quite often says to me, why the hell are you doing what you're doing? Why don't you just do deals? You would make more money. And I have to remind him that money is not everything. And I absolutely love making a difference to other people, and particularly women. And women, as they get older, lose confidence. That's a really common thing. And so to have the power to transform your life through a property transaction is incredibly affirming and confidence building. And so that's why I do it, because I love to see that happen with people that I work with.
Yeah, very good. And so, what's your main purpose in your education? And when you say renovating, is it mainly just cosmetic renovations, structural renovations, kitchens and bathrooms?
Okay, so it's basically the full gamut of renovating, but I personally think in renovating, the sweet spot is what I call cosmetic plus. So it's halfway between a cosmetic and a structural renovation. Often it will mean removing a wall between the kitchen and the living room to create that more open plan, so it might require a beam. But generally it's pretty low skill level required, but produces best return on investment, both in money and in time and in blood, sweat and tears. And so generally we work out our feasibility on a 10% profit, but I have quite a lot of students who are doing 20% plus, just because they've really worked out the best niche for them. They know their market. They deliver a product that really speaks to their market.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And for those who've listened to my podcast before, you know that, I do encourage people to start off in renovations. Even though you may want to be doing development, they do complement each other and go hand in hand. It is an essential skill. So, so in terms of basic renovation mistakes, because you probably come across a lot of beginners. Is that right, Bernadette? They watch TV shows and the block, and they say, well, I want to be what that person does or does that there. And obviously they're not really aware of how much it costs or how much time and approvals required. So what are some of the mistakes that beginners often make that you see that could be definitely avoided?
Well, it's interesting, because I think a lot of people come to us because they're smart enough to know there's more to it than what they see on telly, which is a good thing. And I'm the perfect person to teach people to avoid mistakes, because I've pretty much made every one of them. And one of the mistakes that we made early, and I do see a lot of people falling into this trap, is, so I'm married to a Stephen, who's been in the building industry now for 40 years. He's he's got a very high skill level in terms of construction project management. And when we were first starting out on this path, we thought that because he had that building background, that was all you needed to succeed.
Yes.
And so we did it his way, which is how a builder would approach a project, and it tanked, basically. Okay. We didn't lose money, but we produced a really high quality project, but it wasn't profitable. And it was only when I made that decision to, I guess, go back to the drawing board and sort of, I'll talk about it as a marriage of, a housewife savviness with professional project management skills, where we really got to the core of what makes a profit.
Yeah.
So first thing is thinking it's just about the renovation.
Yes.
Because to be honest with you, you can do like a fairly mediocre renovation, but if you've got your strategy, you're right, and you've delivered to your market, then you can make a decent profit. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
sure.
that's one big mistake. The biggest mistakes are blowing out the budget, not having enough buffer, not managing your trades, particularly women. We have got an extra hurdle to get over because, I even have that today. If Stephen and I both go and get the same quote, his will be cheaper. So I have to fight to get my, prices in at a reasonable. So they're probably the three big ones.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why in my trainings, my course, like we've talked about previously, when one of your podcasts is buying right. I think, like you said, it's not just about the renovation. It's not about making it look pretty. That's not the only thing. It's about buying right. When you're buying under market value, you make your money when you buy, and you've got a pre-existing profit margin, and the renovation is the formality. So
exactly. And so I always think it's like you need the vendor to pay the stamp duty. Okay, so you need to be buying under value to that extent. And that in my early days was problematic for my students because what they would do is they'd do the training, they'd come out all guns blazing, and then would spend a year looking for a property. Okay, that was problematic because they just couldn't get that deal. And so what I did about that is actually I started using buyer's agents myself to get them sort of savvy on what a renovator to sell needed, because most buyer's agents, it's a big mindset shift.
For sure.
A good buy for a renovate and hold would be something that's quite early in the gentrification process and would take a long time to become a good flip project. So, and so now we have a team of buyer's agents that our students can use, that they know can look after their interests and get something that they can make a profit on.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. Is it's one thing to do a renovation, like you said, and we're wanting to move away from it's just a renovation or the process of renovation. But it's about being profitable and making a profit on it, because if you can't make money on it while you're doing it, right, you're just doing it for the love, and it's a bit putting in capital, time, energy that you could be doing other things with. So. And
that's another thing particularly with the women that, I'm saying women because it's predominantly women. Often they'll have a husband or a partner that, most times it's that's in it with them, but it's the woman that's the driver. And often they will be so sort of blinkered by the actual creative process that they don't put enough effort into the actual money-making part of it. And so that can be another issue that does come up.
Yeah. And I think that's a general challenge generally. Like my clients, they've done projects where they just want to do a project, whether it's a free block of land, keep the house at the front, or I want to do a subdivision and I want the experience. And that is very, very dangerous from a risk point of view. You're going to spend $500,000, $1 million on an experience, and that experience may not end up a positive experience. You've worked so hard to accumulate that wealth and use that serviceability and leverage up, and then if the market changes, for sure, that's where you can be quite vulnerable and exposed. So in terms of in the current market environment, with the things that are happening, and what adjustments do you see that renovators or your students should be making in the current marketplace?
So basically, we're watching the market at the moment. I think it's pretty clear that there's going to be a bit of a change in property values once the stimulus dries up, the government stimulus, and there will be some areas that are harder hit than others because they're more exposed to the unemployment. And so basically what we're doing is just be building in bigger buffers to make sure that and I think the big thing with renovating is you've got to be prepared to hold. If you want to sell and the market's changed, then you've got to be prepared to hold. Buying, renovating and selling is the highest risk strategy. So, and if you've got your deal right in the beginning, I believe that by holding, and unfortunately I've learnt this the hard way, by holding, usually, well, it definitely every time, you just hold it until the market picks up, because, you know, we know the market sort of goes like this. It's up and down all the time. And so that's pretty much how we deal with it.
Yeah, I understand. And I think that's some things that people aren't financially geared up for to be able to hold it. And then they sometimes just drop the ball, so to speak, and lose money because they are forced in a position to sell it. You know, I've been in that position before where I've built big houses and holding costs are quite expensive, low doc loans. This is back in late 2008, 2009, 8, 9, 10% interest rates, $5,000 a month per house, multiplied by 5 houses. That's a lot of holding costs. So, so do you encourage your clients to build new at all? Obviously, you are, advocating renovations, but
yes. So, so one of the things that we've been doing to really increase the profit potential is what you would call a 1 into 2 or a 1 into 3. And so basically and this is particularly good for a buy and hold strategy. So if you buy a house to renovate that's on a block that's big enough to subdivide and you renovate and sell the house, and then you've got what you call a free block.
Yes.
And I suggest building new if you're going to hold it, because then you've got that high depreciation rate, at least for the first 5 years. And you've also got a new property that's easy to maintain and has got a long life. So yes, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And look, in terms of our strategies, they can very much complement. I've built a lot of houses as a developer, but I discourage people to build and sell. I generally say, I only personally build to hold, and that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm building a house with a multiple occupancy income to be able to hold there, 5 tenants on one house there. I believe you mentioned a while back you're looking into, I think it was a new gen property or a next gen property.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more about that, if able?
Yeah, so basically that's part of my retirement plan. I bought a block in Western Sydney, a few years ago now. And so my plan for that originally was just to develop townhouses. But then I decided to still subdivide into townhouse lots, but build lots of new gen boarding house. But for those who don't know that legislation, boarding house has very bad connotations. Sure. But basically it's a legislation in Australia where you can build modern day studios. And this is in an area that it's sort of like a work hub. There's a lot going on there. And it's near the new Badgerys Creek Airport. And so the reason I've decided to still subdivide into townhouse lots is to reduce the risk. So that it's a big block, and I could probably get a 20-room new gen on. But if we ever had to sell for whatever reason, you'd be limited to superannuation funds and whatever. Whereas if I subdivide them into, say, 5 lots of 4, and it's much, I think, a better quality life for the people. Also, if you're less than 5, you don't need to have a communal area, so it's like a normal home, and you don't need to have a manager. So, so that's really the strategy. Yeah.
And that's really aligned with the stuff that I teach in terms of risk management and exit strategy. Like you said before, is having one building with 20 tenants from an exit strategy point of view is a lot more, the market's a lot more thin, a lot harder to finance, a lot harder to sell. A lot less buyers than potentially. Even if you have 5 blocks, you can build one at a time, build 1 or build 2. And then when you feel that you're ready, build another 2 or 3, or you could sell 3, keep 2. There's so many different ways that you can cut that pie as opposed to just one block all in.
Exactly.
$5 million build cost, isn't it? I'm just exaggerating, but it's an all in play, isn't it?
The other thing about that particular block is the house that's on it at the moment, I've had on Airbnb for as long as we've owned it.
Yeah.
And I know, so I understand the Airbnb market there. We have a lot of Olympic teams coming to use the water sport venues. We have Eastern Creek teams coming. So there is a need for a big property. So I'm thinking about maybe just having one be just a 4-bedroom house.
Yes.
Because I just know there's a market for it.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing you've mentioned there indirectly is being an area expert. I think that's another mistake that newbies make is that they don't focus enough on one area. They try to spread themselves out on Queensland, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, Western Sydney, and then they go to Melbourne and Portland, and there's just so many different niches that people don't understand.
Exactly, and that's one of the reasons why I actually bought that block through a buyer's agent. Like, I'm not an area expert. I've learnt the market, the Airbnb market, by virtue of having a property there, but I'm not an area expert as such, and I'm not going to, because I think it takes months, maybe years to become an expert in an area. I'm not even going to attempt that because it's not my interest. So and I think that there's enough due diligence in finding the right expert to work with, because obviously there are buyer's agents and buyer's agents. So so there you go.
Very good, very good. So how can people find out more about your programs there, Bernadette? And
so we have a website called the School of Renovating, www.theschoolofrenovating.com. And we also have a podcast, as Nyan mentioned before, called She Renovates. So yes, feel free to send me an email and I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Very good, guys. Yeah, so thanks, Bernadette, for your time there. I'll put in some of the links on the podcast notes below. And it's been a great learning time with Bernadette there. Thanks again, Bernadette, so much for your time, man. We'll catch up with you another time, hey?
Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks, everybody. Catch you next time.